David found a crying woman in expensive clothes sitting between parked cars outside the grocery store. "My father wants to force me into marriage," she sobbed desperately. "I have nowhere to go." David offered help, never suspecting Sarah Blackwood was a billionaire heiress in hiding. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The cold evening wind whipped through the parking lot as David pushed his squeaky shopping cart toward his beat-up Honda Civic. His 6-year-old daughter Lucy skipped beside him, chattering excitedly about the cookies they'd bought for her school bake sale tomorrow. "Daddy, can we get ice cream next time?" Lucy asked, tugging on his worn jacket sleeve. "Maybe next month, sweetie," David replied, calculating in his head how the $43 he'd just spent would affect their grocery budget for the rest of the week. That's when he heard it, soft sobbing coming from behind a row of cars. David stopped pushing the cart and listened carefully. The crying was definitely real, and it sounded like someone in serious distress. He looked down at Lucy, who had also noticed the sound. "Someone's sad, Daddy," Lucy whispered with the innocent concern only children possess. David's first instinct was to keep walking. As a single father working 2 jobs just to make rent, he barely had time to handle his own problems, let alone a stranger's. But the crying continued, growing more desperate with each passing second. "Stay right here with the cart," David told Lucy firmly. "Don't move, okay?" He walked toward the sound and found a young woman sitting on the cold asphalt between 2 parked cars. She was hunched over, her long dark hair covering her face, shoulders shaking with each sob. Her clothes looked expensive, a designer coat and boots that probably cost more than David made in a month, but she seemed completely broken. "Excuse me," David said gently, crouching down to her level. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman looked up, and David was struck by her beauty despite the tears streaming down her face. She had striking green eyes, high cheekbones, and the kind of elegance that suggested wealth and privilege. But right now she looked utterly lost and afraid. "I'm sorry," she stammered, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I didn't mean to bother anyone. I don't know what to do." "What happened?" David asked, his natural compassion overriding his exhaustion. The woman, who looked to be in her late 20s, took a shaky breath. "My name is Sarah. I ran away from my family tonight. I had a huge fight with my father and I just grabbed my purse and left. But my credit cards aren't working, my phone is dead, and I don't have anywhere to go." David studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but all he saw was genuine fear and desperation. "Do you have friends you could call? Family members who might help?" Sarah shook her head vigorously. "My father controls everything. He's probably already frozen all my accounts and told security to bring me back. I can't go home, not after what he did tonight." "What did he do?" David asked carefully. Fresh tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "He arranged a marriage for me. To some businessman I've never met, just to merge our companies. When I refused, he said I was ungrateful and selfish. He told me I either marry this man or get disowned completely." David felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "That's terrible. No one should be forced into marriage." "I've been trapped my whole life," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "I've never had a real job, never lived on my own, never made my own decisions. Tonight was the first time I ever stood up to him, and now I'm sitting in a parking lot with nowhere to go." David looked back at Lucy, who was patiently waiting by their cart, then back at Sarah. Every practical part of his brain told him to offer to call the police or a women's shelter and walk away. He had enough problems without taking on a stranger's drama. But something about Sarah's situation reminded him of his own past struggles. 3 years ago, when Lucy's mother abandoned them both, David had felt just as lost and desperate. If a kind stranger hadn't helped him find emergency housing and pointed him toward social services, he and Lucy might have ended up homeless. "Listen," David said, making a decision that would change both their lives, "I don't have much, but you can't stay here in the cold. I have a small apartment about 10 minutes away. You can spend the night on my couch, get cleaned up, and figure out your next steps tomorrow." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that? For a complete stranger?" "Someone helped me once when I needed it most," David said simply. "Besides, my daughter Lucy is watching, and I want her to see that we help people when they're in trouble." As if summoned by her name, Lucy appeared beside David. "Daddy, is the sad lady okay?" David smiled at his daughter's concern. "Lucy, this is Sarah. She's having a difficult day and we're going to help her feel better." Lucy studied Sarah with the direct gaze of a child. "Why are you sitting on the ground? It's dirty and cold." Despite everything, Sarah laughed, a real laugh that transformed her entire face. You're absolutely right. It is dirty and cold. You can come to our house, Lucy announced with the confident generosity of childhood. We have hot chocolate and blankets. Sarah looked between David and Lucy, tears of gratitude replacing her tears of despair. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. It's not an imposition, David said, standing and offering her his hand. It's what neighbors do for each other. During the short drive to David's apartment, Sarah learned more about her unlikely rescuers. David worked as a night security guard at a downtown office building and did freelance computer repair during the day. Lucy attended the local elementary school and loved art, books, and asking endless questions about everything. What about your wife? Sarah asked carefully as they pulled into the parking lot of a modest apartment complex. It's just me and Lucy, David said without elaborating. Has been for 3 years now. David's apartment was small but immaculately clean. The furniture was clearly secondhand, but everything was organized and cared for. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator, and bookshelves lined the walls, filled with library books and Lucy's school projects. It's not much, David said, suddenly self-conscious about bringing someone like Sarah into his humble home. It's perfect, Sarah said, and she meant it. The apartment radiated warmth and love in a way her family's mansion never had. It feels like a real home. Lucy immediately took charge of making Sarah comfortable, bringing her a soft blanket and insisting on making hot chocolate for everyone. As they sat around the small kitchen table, Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in years. What do you do for work? Lucy asked Sarah with childlike directness. Sarah paused, realizing she'd never actually had to answer that question before. Well, I don't really work. My family has a lot of money, so I've never needed a job. That sounds boring, Lucy declared. Daddy says work makes you feel proud and helpful. David looked embarrassed. Lucy, not everyone needs to work like we do. Actually, Sarah said thoughtfully, Lucy's right. It does sound boring. I've never done anything meaningful with my life. That night, as Sarah lay on David's comfortable couch, she thought about her conversation with Lucy. The 6-year-old had asked more genuine questions about her dreams and interests than anyone had in her entire privileged life. The next morning, Sarah woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Lucy's laughter. She found them in the kitchen, where David was flipping pancakes while Lucy set the table with mismatched plates. Good morning, David said with a warm smile. I hope you slept okay. Better than I have in months, Sarah admitted. Over breakfast, they talked about Sarah's options. David had researched women's shelters and job placement programs on his old laptop, approaching her problems with the same methodical care he brought to everything else. The thing is, Sarah said slowly, I don't want to go back to that life. But I don't know how to live any other way. You could learn, Lucy said matter-of-factly. I didn't know how to ride a bike, but Daddy taught me. Now I'm really good at it. David and Sarah exchanged amused glances over Lucy's head. Lucy's right, David said. Everyone starts somewhere. The question is, what do you want to do? Sarah thought about it seriously. I've always loved children. I volunteered at a children's hospital when I was in college, before my father made me stop. I felt more useful there than I ever have at charity galas or board meetings. You could be a teacher, Lucy exclaimed. Miss Peterson is the best teacher ever and she makes learning fun. I'd need to go back to school, Sarah mused. Get proper training and certification. There are programs for that, David said. Community college has great education courses and they're affordable. Sarah's face fell. Affordable for normal people, maybe. But I don't have access to my trust fund anymore, and I have no credit history in my own name. David was quiet for a moment, thinking. What if you stayed here while you figured things out? You could get a part-time job, save money for school, and gradually build an independent life. I couldn't ask you to do that, Sarah protested. You're not asking, David said firmly. I'm offering. Lucy likes having you around and honestly it would help with childcare. I work nights, so Lucy stays with my neighbor Mrs. Martinez. But if you were here, I could watch Lucy, Sarah said, her face lighting up. I'd love to help with her. Really? Lucy bounced in her chair. You could help me with my art projects and read me stories. And so began an arrangement that none of them expected to last more than a few weeks. Sarah threw herself into her new life with determination that surprised everyone, including herself. She found a job at a local daycare center, starting as an assistant and quickly proving herself capable and caring. The work was harder than anything she'd ever done, but infinitely more rewarding than cutting ribbons at charity events. David helped her navigate practical challenges she'd never faced, opening a bank account, building credit, budgeting for groceries. In return, Sarah brought joy and stability to Lucy's after-school hours, helping with homework, cooking dinner, and providing the kind of patient, nurturing care that David's hectic schedule sometimes made difficult. "You're really good with her," David told Sarah one evening as they watched Lucy practice her reading. "She's an amazing kid," Sarah replied. "You've done an incredible job raising her." "It hasn't been easy," David admitted. "After her mother left, I thought I'd mess everything up. I still worry about that." Sarah studied his profile as he watched Lucy with pure love and pride. "Her mother left?" David nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "Jessica couldn't handle the responsibility. One day she just decided she wanted her old life back. Parties, freedom, no obligations. She signed over custody and moved across the country." "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. "That must have been devastating." "For me, yes. But Lucy was only 3, so she doesn't really remember Jessica being around much anyway. In some ways it was better that it happened when Lucy was young." Sarah watched Lucy sound out a difficult word, her little face scrunched in concentration. "Lucy's lucky to have you. You're an amazing father." David looked at Sarah with surprise. "You really think so?" "I know so. You put her needs above everything else, but you still make her feel safe and loved and valued. That's exactly what every child deserves." Their eyes met across the room and something shifted between them. What had started as a temporary arrangement based on mutual need was gradually becoming something deeper. Weeks turned into months. Sarah enrolled in evening classes at the community college, studying early childhood education with the passion of someone finally pursuing their true calling. David supported her studies, often helping her practice lesson plans with Lucy as their willing test student. Their small apartment had never felt crowded. Instead, it felt complete. Sarah brought laughter and warmth that had been missing since Jessica left. Lucy blossomed under the attention of 2 caring adults who genuinely enjoyed her company. One evening, as they sat together grading Sarah's practice worksheets while Lucy drew pictures at the kitchen table, David realized he was completely happy for the first time in years. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She looked up from her papers, concerned by his serious tone. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you," David said simply. "I know this whole situation is complicated, and I don't want to pressure you or make things awkward. But I couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel this way." Sarah's breath caught. She'd been fighting the same feelings for weeks, telling herself that she couldn't complicate David and Lucy's lives any further. But sitting in their warm kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd built together, she couldn't deny her heart anymore. "I love you too," she whispered. "I love both of you. This family we've created, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me." Lucy looked up from her drawing with a knowing smile. "Are you and Daddy gonna get married like in the movies?" David and Sarah laughed, the tension breaking into joy. "Maybe someday, sweetheart," Sarah said, reaching over to ruffle Lucy's hair. "Would that be okay with you?" "Yes," Lucy declared. "Then you could be my real mom." Sarah's eyes filled with happy tears. "I'd love that more than anything." Their happiness was about to be tested in ways they never imagined. 6 months after Sarah had first appeared in that parking lot, a black limousine pulled up outside David's apartment building. Sarah recognized it immediately and felt her stomach drop. "David," she said, her voice tight with fear, "my father's here." Through the window, they watched as an imposing man in an expensive suit emerged from the limousine, followed by 2 security guards. Richard Blackwood was tall, silver-haired, and carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to getting his way. "How did he find you?" David asked, instinctively moving to stand between Sarah and the door. "He probably hired private investigators," Sarah said, her hands shaking. "He never gives up on anything he considers his property." The knock on the door was firm and authoritative. David opened it slowly, keeping the chain latch engaged. "I'm looking for my daughter, Sarah Blackwood," Richard said coldly. "I know she's here." "There's no one here by that name," David replied evenly. Richard's smile was sharp and dangerous. "Don't lie to me, son. I have photographs of her entering this building. Now step aside and let me speak to her." Sarah appeared beside David, her chin raised in defiance despite her fear. "Hello, Father." "Sarah." Richard's voice was controlled, but David could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "You've caused quite a commotion. It's time to come home." "This is my home," Sarah said firmly. Richard's gaze swept over the modest apartment, taking in the second-hand furniture and children's toys scattered around. His expression was one of disgusted disbelief. "You're living in this hovel with some nobody and his child?" Richard's voice dripped with contempt. "Have you completely lost your mind?" "Don't talk about them like that," Sarah snapped. "David and Lucy are the best people I've ever known." Richard turned his cold stare on David. "What's your name?" "David Chin," David replied, not backing down despite feeling completely outmatched. "Well, Mr. Chin, I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. My daughter is worth approximately $2.8 billion. If you think some sob story about helping a crying woman will get you access to that money, you're sadly mistaken." David's jaw dropped. "Billion? With a B?" Richard's smile was triumphant. "She didn't tell you, did she? Sarah is the sole heir to Blackwood Industries. When I die, she'll control one of the largest conglomerates in the world. Did you really think she was just some lost girl who needed saving?" David looked at Sarah with confusion and hurt. "Is that true?" Sarah's face was pale but determined. "Yes, it's true. But it doesn't matter. I don't want that life." "Of course you want it," Richard said impatiently. "You're just having a little rebellion. It's time to grow up and accept your responsibilities." "My responsibilities?" Sarah's voice rose. "Like marrying some stranger for a business merger? Like spending my life cutting ribbons and hosting parties while other people do all the actual work? Like maintaining the legacy your grandfather and I built?" Richard shot back. "Like understanding that personal desires are less important than family obligations." Lucy, who had been hiding behind David throughout the confrontation, suddenly stepped forward. "You're mean," she told Richard with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Sarah doesn't want to go with you, so you should leave her alone." Richard looked down at Lucy with surprise, as if he'd forgotten children could speak. "This doesn't concern you, little girl." "Yes, it does," Lucy said stubbornly. "Sarah is part of our family now. Families stick together." Richard's expression softened slightly as he looked at Lucy, perhaps remembering Sarah at that age. But his voice remained firm. "Sarah, you have 1 week to end this ridiculous charade and come home. If you don't, I'll cut off your access to the trust fund permanently and remove you from my will." "I already told you," Sarah said quietly. "I don't want your money." "Maybe you don't," Richard said, his gaze shifting meaningfully to David, "but I wonder how your boyfriend feels about that." The implication hung in the air like poison. Richard was suggesting that David was only interested in Sarah for her wealth, and now that the money was being threatened, he'd pressure her to reconcile with her family. David felt sick. The woman he'd fallen in love with wasn't just wealthy, she was one of the richest people in the world. And now her father was offering him a choice: convince Sarah to return home and potentially gain access to billions, or let her give it all up for a life of middle-class struggle. "David," Sarah said urgently, recognizing the doubt in his eyes, "please don't listen to him. The money doesn't matter to me." But David was remembering all the times Sarah had struggled with basic tasks, using a washing machine, comparing grocery prices, understanding how much things cost. He'd thought she was just sheltered. Now he realized she'd been living a completely different reality. "I need some time to think," David said quietly. Sarah's face crumpled. "David, please?" "1 week," Richard repeated, satisfied that he'd planted seeds of doubt. "Sarah knows how to reach me." After they left, the apartment felt cold and empty despite Sarah and Lucy both being there. Sarah tried to explain, to make David understand that her feelings for him were real regardless of her background. "I should have told you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I was afraid you'd see me differently." "How am I supposed to see you?" David asked, running his hands through his hair. "Everything I thought I knew about you was a lie." "Not everything," Sarah protested. "My feelings for you and Lucy are real. This life we've built together is real." But David was struggling with the magnitude of what he'd learned. Sarah wasn't just wealthy, she was generationally, mind-bendingly rich. The kind of rich that came with power, influence, and responsibilities he couldn't even imagine. "What about Lucy?" David asked. "What kind of life can I give her compared to what you're walking away from?" "A life filled with love," Sarah said desperately. "That's worth more than all the money in the world." But David's mind was reeling with possibilities. With Sarah's resources, Lucy could attend the best schools, have opportunities David could never provide. He could quit his exhausting jobs and actually spend time with his daughter instead of working around the clock just to pay rent. "Maybe your father is right," David said slowly. "Maybe you should go back." Sarah stared at him in shock. "You want me to leave?" "I want what's best for everyone," David said, But even as he said it, he knew he was making a terrible mistake. That night, Sarah packed her few belongings with a heavy heart. Lucy cried and begged her not to go, not understanding why the adults in her life were making such a devastating decision. "I'll always love you," Sarah told Lucy as she hugged her goodbye. "Never forget that." "Then don't go." Lucy sobbed. "Please don't leave us like Mommy did." Sarah's heart shattered completely, but David had made his choice clear. She called her father and agreed to return home. The months that followed were miserable for everyone. David threw himself into work, trying to forget the warmth and joy Sarah had brought to their lives. Lucy asked about Sarah constantly, unable to understand why someone who loved them would just disappear. "Did Sarah stop loving us?" Lucy asked one night as David tucked her into bed. "No, sweetheart," David said, his heart breaking. "Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense even to themselves." Meanwhile, Sarah was back in her gilded cage, going through the motions of her privileged life while feeling empty inside. She attended board meetings she didn't care about, hosted charity events that felt meaningless, and listened to her father's plans for her future marriage with growing despair. "You'll thank me someday," Richard told her after a particularly successful business dinner. "That man and his child were holding you back from your true potential." But Sarah knew better. David and Lucy hadn't been holding her back. They'd been helping her become the person she was meant to be. 3 months after leaving, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She hired the best lawyers money could buy and began the complex process of establishing her independence from her father's control. It took 6 months of legal battles, but Sarah finally gained access to her trust fund and voting rights in the company. She was now worth billions in her own right, with no strings attached to her father's approval. The first thing she did was establish a foundation dedicated to helping single parents and their children. The second thing she did was drive to David's apartment building and wait in the parking lot, just as he had found her over a year ago. When David emerged from the building with Lucy after school, he stopped in shock. Sarah was sitting on the hood of a modest Honda Civic. She'd sold her luxury car months ago, holding a sign that read, "I'm sorry, Sarah." Lucy broke free from David's hand and ran to her, throwing herself into Sarah's arms. "I missed you so much," Sarah whispered, holding Lucy tight. David approached slowly, his face unreadable. "What are you doing here?" "I came to tell you that you were right," Sarah said, still holding Lucy. "I should have gone back to my father." David's face fell, but Sarah continued quickly. "I should have gone back so I could claim my inheritance and gain control of my own life. Now I can choose how to live, and I choose this. I choose you and Lucy and the life we built together." She reached into her purse and pulled out a document. "I've established a foundation with most of my inheritance. It helps single parents with housing, childcare, and education. I kept enough money to live comfortably, but not so much that it comes between us." David stared at the document, then at Sarah. "You gave away billions of dollars?" "I kept the important parts," Sarah said with a smile. "The ability to help people and the freedom to choose my own path. Everything else was just noise." "But your father disowned me completely when I took control of my trust fund," Sarah said with a shrug. "Turns out I don't need his approval to be happy." David looked into Sarah's eyes and saw the same woman who had cried in a parking lot over a year ago, vulnerable, real, and absolutely sincere. "I love you," he said simply. "I never stopped loving you." "I love you too," Sarah replied. "Both of you. If you'll have me back." Lucy answered for both of them by wrapping her arms around both adults and declaring, "We're a family again." 2 years later, David and Sarah were married in the community center where Sarah now worked as a certified teacher. Lucy was the flower girl, proudly scattering petals while wearing a dress she'd helped Sarah pick out. The reception was attended by families from the community center, David's co-workers, and Sarah's former classmates from college, the first real friends she'd ever made. Richard Blackwood was not invited and would never meet his step-granddaughter. During their first dance as husband and wife, David whispered in Sarah's ear, "Any regrets about giving up the billion-dollar lifestyle?" Sarah looked around at their friends and family, at Lucy laughing with the other children, at the simple decorations they'd hung themselves with love and care. "Not even for a second," she whispered back. "This is worth more than all the money in the world." As they swayed to the music, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them together. She'd thought she was running away from her old life that night in the parking lot, but really she'd been running toward her true life, one filled with purpose, love, and the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars. Sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as ordinary moments. Sometimes a crying woman in a parking lot is exactly what she appears to be. Someone who needs help finding her way home. And sometimes helping a stranger leads to discovering that home isn't a place at all. It's the people who choose to love you not for what you have, but for who you are. David, Sarah, and Lucy had found that kind of home in each other. And that was worth more than any inheritance could ever be.